Football has always been king here in Cleveland. And no better time for that coronation than back in 1964. That was the last time the city of Cleveland won a significant world championship of any kind. But we're about to blossom into a new era. Hello, everybody. I'm Ronnie Duncan. You know, the old Cleveland Browns Stadium is gone, as well as the old Cleveland Browns. But right here on the same foundation, a new Cleveland Browns Stadium, but the spirit never died. We're going to take a look back at the 1964 Cleveland Browns team. Names like Walter Beach, Paul Warfield, Leroy Kelly, John Wooten, Frank Ryan, Gary Collins, and of course, their immortal Jim Brown. Right here on Village Television, we call it the Untold Stories of the 1964 championship team. The other color of winning. This is a story that will blossom and grow on you. The 60s were a turbulent time in American history. The United States was very much racially divided, and the civil rights movement was a bona fide evolution of the Renaissance for the liberties of which we enjoy today.
I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal.
The nation was still mourning the assassination of President John F. Kennedy just a year earlier. Sunday afternoons gave America a chance to heal itself from the tragedies that tried to besiege its pride. Baseball wasn't a popular game of choice back then, at least not in this town. Instead, the smell of the pigskin would delight and put a smile on the faces of folks in Cleveland and mostly all of Northeast Ohio. The Browns were racially mixed, led by perhaps the greatest football player of his time and perhaps of all time, the legendary Jim Brown. Although the homeland in Cleveland were alienated by race and color, we were all united as one on Sunday afternoons. That common trust was the Browns, and without even knowing, they helped heal some of the wounds of segregation throughout this nation. When the Browns in 1964 beat the favorite Baltimore Colts, led by future Hall of Famer Johnny Unitas, that day was perhaps the greatest Sunday around here in more than 40 years.
We were overachievers. The pride was there. You got to remember the times. You know, 2 years later, the cities were burning. A black guy and a white guy didn't go out and have a drink together. I mean, I talked to Jim Brown. I got along with everybody. But you got to remember the times. The 60s were turmoil, and that also affected sports. But somehow we got along. We got along, and it was a fast journey, and we were not a great team. But when we had to play, it was funny. When we had to play, it seems our defense was the fearsome foursome, the purple people eaters, at times. And other times, they were the rubber band defense. We'd sit there as an offense and go, "Oh my God, they're going to score again. We got to get back in there." And, you know, you're sitting with the best football player of all time right beside you in the huddle. So that's a confidence builder. But yet he turns to you and says, "We got to throw the ball because we got two receivers that can catch it, Warfield and me." So we just had a great day.
And during the time of discrimination, I really knew that we should play hard and we should make our points by sticking together. And so when you came to the Cleveland Browns and you were black, you had to get in line. We didn't have renegades. We were organized, we were purposeful, we emphasized education, we emphasized being an entrepreneur, entrepreneurship. So when you look at the black players from those days, all of those individuals are successful. Not because of me, but because of the atmosphere of the team. But even so, you had white players that were really fine people. And the one thing we had in common is we all wanted to win. And we all understood we had different roles. I was the running back. You know, so if I was a star, that's cool, but I'm still only the running back. I'm not the defensive back. I'm not the offensive tackle. I'm not the quarterback. I'm not the wide receivers. So we had the atmosphere of everybody contributing. And then when you see the guys now, and they've had a chance to reflect and to know that being a world champion is like one in a lifetime as far as opportunity, they have a greater appreciation than they ever could at that particular time. So as you listen to them articulate their feelings, those are genuine feelings. A lot of them because of reflection. And it makes me feel very good because they always try to trick you to be popular during an age, saying what you are supposed to say, rather than being unpopular and saying what is right to say. When you tell the truth, it's going to eventually come out, and it's going to win over. So what you see is the result of an honest kind of approach to freedom, equality, and justice with the Cleveland Browns at that particular time.
The fact is that athletics doesn't really see racial divides. And it brings everybody with ability together, regardless of color or religion or whatever. And that's a very positive force. And so we set an example in many ways. And of course, Jim himself was outspoken about, let's get across this divide and get us all blended. And right now, I think things are a lot better than they were then even. And then they were a lot better than they were a few years before that.
The time during the 1960s were very turbulent times, and there was always an undercurrent of race, even on the football field, and an undercurrent of race on the team. And if you're committed to excellence, which I think we were, and if you're committed to racial integrity, which I think we were as players, there was always an even number on the of blacks or African Americans on the football team. In fact, we used to joke about it. We said we'd always count near the end of the final cut. We'd start counting. We said, well, you know, Jim is going to be on the team. You know, Wooten is going to be on the team. And what you start doing is adding up the numbers. And if you got to 5, you have to say, well, they're going to even put one more on the team, or they're going to cut somebody so that they could have the even number. One of the real interesting things that took place with the Browns, in my experience, is that we were a close and cohesive group as African Americans on this football team, and we were a close and cohesive group as African Americans and those of European ancestry. So we were loyal to each other, and we supported each other. Jim was the cement of the Browns, not only for the team, but as African Americans, as black ball players. We could stand up strong, and we could be racial secure because of Jim. See, that's so I mean, I could posture, not Waller Beach, you know, Waller Beach, who's Waller Beach? You know, we slapped this cat down. But because of him, he carried himself and conducted himself in that way. And what that did is it allowed us to do that. And this is probably the bottom line in that too, is that I also suggest out of that is that that's why the white ball players, they may not have liked Jim, but they respect him. And I think for my own situation, as I live my daily life, I don't really care if white people like me or not, but they're gonna respect me. Why? Because I got integrity. Jim had integrity. As the group, you know, Sam Titmore was part of that group, Tom Gooseby, Walter Roberts, Ernie Green. We had integrity. So you couldn't come to us and scare us around those what I call those boogermans, those moat monsters. There's just monsters that don't exist. You couldn't sell no wolf tickets to me about my race.
Probably had the most intelligent group of individuals in the history of the game. We had some bright people, bright young men. We called Doc, Dr. Beach, doctor because he's so deep. John Wooten was a graduate of the University of Colorado. We had college graduates here who were also socially conscious. And of course, they all were their own people. You know, every black individual on the Cleveland Browns was his own man. We had no flunkies. We had nobody falling behind me from that standpoint. But they understood their value, and they understood the value of being a collective group. And that was the power of it, but it was really the intelligence, the ability to reason and to understand the obstacles and to understand that Cleveland was a hell of a town, because I imagine a lot of fans had contradictions at the time. They loved the football team, the 80,000 people out there screaming, And yet sometimes you couldn't go up to Little Italy and have a meal because of the racism in the restaurants. But somehow we never let that affect us. We stayed proactive. And we knew who we were, and we took ownership in being who we were. See, we were not victims. We didn't feel like we were like victims. We had to complain, of course, about certain things and stand up for certain things. But on the other hand, because of our education, because of who we knew we were, we took a different approach. So we took the proactive approach, which basically always wins everything over. Mandela did it in South Africa when they imprisoned him. His spirituality was so strong until the prison guards started to admire him because they didn't feel as good as he felt, and he was locked up. So they started to admire him, and when he came out and became president, he brought all of them to his inauguration. So his proactive attitude was so great, it made everyone else look at it and want to be like him. So in Cleveland, you know, we would have our attaché cases. We would study philosophies. We would discuss business. We talked about politics. We were very conscious at the time. Football sometimes was like a secondary product because the racial issue was so great at the time. So I would say that, you know, each individual was his own man. He was intelligent, and he understood how it would be much better for us to be a collective body than just a body of individuals.
I mean, people looked to us, and here we are getting along, not arguing, instead of fighting with each other. You know, I came from a poor background in the coal regions, and, you know, I was accustomed to that. We were picked on. And I remember my second year going into Dallas, playing with the greatest runner of all time. The second game of the year, first away trip in the South at that time. And we're staying out at the Ramada Inn at the airport. And I'm going, what is this? Because, you know, Cleveland Browns, we stay at the best places. Well, stupid 22-year-old, blacks aren't allowed in downtown hotels. 63. Well, Jim Brown the next day goes out and runs for 237 yards. And in fact, I asked him last night backstage, did that burn you, Jim? And being the way Jim is, he said, he don't let the past negativity govern what he does today, which is the proper statement. But personally, it would have teed me off. I'm a different character, but those were the times we lived in. And, you know, there was unwritten rules, like when I was a rookie. Coaches, rookies, and black guys rode the first bus, including Jim Brown. I said, what is this? What is this? Should be no separation. We fight as one. We do on Sunday. What the hell is that?
America had to go through a transition. And those sorts of transitions are tough because everybody's got sort of a built-in edge on things. It's not always right. And it gets chipped away. And it did get chipped away, I think.
The Browns beat the Baltimore Colts 27-0 for the NFL championship back in 1964. During halftime of the Browns game with the Baltimore Ravens in 2004, Cleveland once again showcased these ageless warriors. The ceremonies were full of zest and surprises, as the last NFL championship trophy ever made was put on display for all to see.
We knew that the trophy was never presented to us in the locker room following the game there in '64. There was never no trophy. We don't know what happened to it, but we know that the league never made an official presentation to us there in the locker room. So we just always wondered what happened to it. And of course, it was just a beautiful trophy, really, you know, to see the league and the Browns did themselves proud with that trophy. It's a great looking trophy.
These modern-day gladiators of some 40 years ago heard the cheers from a city known as the pride of the working man. Cleveland, Ohio loves their Cleveland Browns. The hard work and loyalty the Browns embodied then is still appreciated to this day. Every member of that illustrious squad, with exception of the late and great Lou Groza, was in attendance.
It's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. And apparently that says we all took care of ourselves, and I know we didn't. I do now in the last 20 years, but when I played, not like now. I played 10 years, probably could have played longer, but yeah, it's amazing when you think about it. Because there's some guys that are 70 years old, not in good shape. Mo Gillespie's 73, right? I mean, he played I went to Maryland. I mean, he played in the Sugar Bowl in 1950. So there are some old timers there.
It is a great tribute to this organization and to the players who played on that 1964 team. And the last championship that was won by a major professional sports team here in Cleveland. I feel just so good about being able to be among my former teammates. I was a young player during that year of the championship year. A lot of great things happened for me individually, but a lot of wonderful things happened to us as a team.
This has been just a tremendous experience. It's certainly one. I've got 3 grandkids, and rest assured, I'll be bringing them back just so they can see this. They're down in Texas, just so they can see what all of this is about. And again, this is why it's so wonderful that it's right here in Cleveland. You understand what I'm saying when I say that? That this is where Granddad played, here, not in Baltimore, here. See, and that's why it's so important.
Dick Shafrath was honored that the memories of the '64 team will last forever, because in Cleveland, forever never dies.
You can't help it but get excited with the fans, but it's especially gratifying to be with all my brothers. Played 40 years ago, and we've told a lot of lies, but I'll tell you what, when you get around this stadium, get around the fans and this new team, we're excited, and we hope a lot of that rubs off on them. But our band of brothers, everybody was an extension of the bench. There wasn't just one team, it was 3 teams, kind of like the Trinity. Father, Son, Holy Ghost, we got it. Amen.
This reunion-type setting brought back millions of memories, both bitter and sweet, during a time when America was learning to deal with one another beyond the color of one man's skin. Local longtime newspaper columnist Lady Gilmore remembers the Browns, and she remembers how it was watching Jim Brown. She enjoyed seeing a proud black man who not only exceeded on the football field, but off.
I want to be like Jim Brown, standing black and tall, standing for what he believed, and no matter what nobody said, he stood for what he was. And that set an example for us. Follow your dream. He was our first football player. So we had to love him, and we supported him. Some of us didn't like what he said, but oh well, we got over it very quickly because he represented us. And we felt the passion and the love from his heart to stand for our people. That's what it was, my brother. Stand for him whether we love him or not, because guess who he represented? Me, you.
Lady Gilmore says being a Browns fan just wasn't about Cleveland, it was about community.
It meant so much to me to see my father and his 3 brothers sitting on our front porch talking about the Cleveland Browns, talking about how times have changed, and that they were here to see the difference and the excitement. I grew up on Cedar, and everybody was running to certain houses, and we just had a great big time drinking Kool-Aid. My mother had a garden in the back, so we was eating collard greens and cornbread, talking about the Cleveland Browns, the excitement, and what it did to our family and our community. My aunt that never had a telephone, she got her first telephone, and they called and told their grandmother, the Cleveland Browns have black people on board. How exciting you thought that made me feel, being the only girl with 3 brothers.
And the news of what the Browns did on the football field went far beyond Ohio. In her many travels down south to see family members, they called the Cleveland Browns their team as well.
So we had family in the Southland, and to go there and tell them, and that's what they thought. It was called Browns because of African Americans and the excitement. And we were there telling them, and then they started saying, we love the Cleveland Browns, way down south back in the woods where there was no roads, just dirt. To hear my grandmother and my great aunts hollering for, we love the Cleveland Browns, because of what we told them, the excitement, one television in the whole neighborhood, and everybody's looking at it down there. That's what it did, my brother.
Sam Tidmore, a native of Cleveland and a past Ohio State Buckeye star linebacker, played for the Browns for 2 years and fell just 1 year short of service on the '64 team before he was traded to Pittsburgh. Tidmore knew then the unwritten taboo laws of the NFL, that as a black man, there was a limited number of spots on the roster that could go to a man of his complexion. And back then, that was par for the course.
Well, we knew there were quotas. We knew that the mindset of the management that we weren't going to have too many, because remember, we couldn't even room with white people in those days either. We all had black roommates. And I think that maybe 3 or 4 years later, they really started integrating black ball players and white ball players in the same room together for the night. So it was very disturbing, and you really don't know in the final analysis why you got traded, or if in fact it was to make room for another black player so they can meet a quota there or whatever. But it was disheartening knowing that there were many guys sitting on the bench who could play, but they were denied that opportunity simply on the basis of color, I felt. We talked about the very first day of camp. I think it was about 12 African Americans in camp. And historically, the Browns had no more than 5. And so we said maybe 6 would make it this year. So we went around the room, I should say, and we talked about who had a bonus, who had an extended contract, who had a 1-year contract. And this was a litmus test. If they had invested in you, there was an opportunity for you to make the team if you just went totally bad. So if they had investment in you, they could probably try to get their investment out, or their return on their investment out of it. So we knew right then would be 6 or 7 of us that really made the team. But however, they quite freely put you on what we call the taxi squad. And I think we ended up with 8 or 9 African Americans that year on the taxi squad, but only 6 on the actual team. Can you imagine what the defensive backfields of the NFL looks like today? Almost black, totally black. And we had a total white defensive backfield in those days. And we knew that with guys like Walter Beach, who came at the same time I did, who did not make it the first year, but became a great player for the Browns in later years. But he was as good then as he was when he activated him later on for that 64 championship team. It was very disheartening, but you played through it, because remember, this was the 60s, and we'd been out marching at our colleges, and we understood what was happening in the nation with Dr. King and Malcolm X and other people who were demonstrating quite actively against the segregation laws of our country.
Cleveland's rich tradition in football and minorities dates back to the early days of Paul Brown, the founding father of this historic franchise, saw the brilliance and play of African Americans long before the NFL ever thought about it. Stars such as Marion Motley and Bill Willis came along long before the NFL entertained their first African American player. Many years later, those first steps of equality helped build a foundation that even exists today.
We had come from the heritage of Bill Willis, of Horace Gillett, of Marion Motley, and those guys who, Marty Bassett, these guys had led the way for us here in the city of Cleveland. Motley and Willis and those guys they'd be at practice just like we are here today. We saw that. We knew they lived in the community where we were. We knew what the challenge was for us to be respectful, carry ourselves in a certain manner, but above all, win. That's what the Browns had done. You know, you go back in the history of the Browns from the All-American Conference on over, 46 on in. The Browns have won, 18, 19 championships. This was the heritage that we had, you know, and again, they were the first to come with the with the African-American guys. You know, Willis and Motley were the first. So we took great pride in that. And of course, we had a great leader in Jim.
I'm gonna tell you something. You know, like you said, going to Morgan State and being drafted by the Browns, you know, in the 8th round, you know, it was just a great opportunity for me, you know, and then to come up here and play with the greatest running back that ever played the game, Jim Brown. And I watched him, you know, we would watch him down at Morgan. We'd get some of those Cleveland Brown games, and that would be the only person I'd be watching, really, you know, Jim Brown, you know. So it was just great, and to be a rookie, you know, with guys like Paul Warfield coming from Ohio State, you know, #1 draft choice of the Browns, you know, playing with Paul, and we had a great specialty team, you know, guys like Sidney Williams and Walter Roberts. Walt came all the way from San Jose, and came to Cleveland training camp on a bus, man. And this what made it so special, and then to win the championship, we had a nucleus of great veterans on that team, and especially that offensive line.
Did you feel that bond right away?
Oh, I tell you, it was touch and go though at first, because my first week in camp I pulled a hamstring, so it scared me, but I had showed enough in those first 4 days that they kept me around, and until camp, the 2 days of practice broke, and we went to started my exhibition games, so, and then my leg healed up, and I came around.
The tradition, the heritage of the Cleveland Browns is so important. And that's why, if you allow me to say this and don't splice it out, that's why we got to be thankful to Art Modell. I don't care who try to slice it, any way they want to slice it. It was Art's own generosity or his own creativity that said, I'm going to leave the colors, I'm going to leave the name, I'm going to leave the tradition, I'm going to leave the heritage here in Cleveland. Because, and it's meaningful to us, otherwise we wouldn't be here today. If he had taken this down to Baltimore, we couldn't come in here and celebrate.
Art was a pioneer of modern times. He bought a team when he was a young man, found the money, came in here, got an office, challenged the great Paul Brown, all the tradition. And when he felt that Paul had gotten stale, he made a move, a very bold move here in Cleveland. But that move proved, as you said, the right move to make, because Blanton Collier was a man that we could deal with much better. He allowed us to become a part of the decision-making policy. And we got great results. But not only that, Art went to Baltimore and won a Super Bowl. Not only that, Baltimore had more black executives, more legitimate black executives, than any team in the National Football League. That was because of Art. So whatever his shortcomings were, he made some major contributions to television, the advancement of television, the first doubleheader. He was an active young owner. So I would have no complaints about him, because when you are in business and you can't get a conference with the mayor and you're losing business in the stadium, and you have to pack up at night and leave, well, you have to have the heart to do that. But the one thing that he did do, I said that if he left the name and the colors, then it'd be all right, but he left. And he called and let me know that he was gonna leave the name and the colors. So I said, hey, if he leaves the name and the colors, the Cleveland Browns are still there.
Still more than 40 years ago, the Browns had more black players on their roster than any other squad in the NFL. And according to Jim Brown and others, it was no mistake. Leroy Kelly and Paul Warfield were both rookies on that '64 championship team. They have fond memories of what it was like then as to what it is like now.
I understood what the legacy, the tradition of this organization was all about at that time. If I could make a parallel, the Cleveland Browns were the New York Yankees of professional football. The team was expected to win, so there were great expectations. When I joined this team as a young rookie, the players expected me to make that contribution to them on the playing field to help them get to where they wanted to go. The mission statement was already there in front of us, which was to go to the championship game. So I learned, my eyes were wide open, and I learned as much as I could about the best way to do things as a Cleveland Brown and do things the right way. And I think it served me very well. I wasn't asked to do the ridiculous things, such as get up on a chair during training camp and sing your Ohio State fight song. These players were not interested in me. They were interested in what I could contribute in terms of helping them win a championship.
While a younger Art Modell may have earned some of those words of justification, we knew this guy would be bitter cold. Obviously, there were moments back in 1964 that might have suggested to fans today in Cleveland the impression this man would betray this city and its team some 31 years later. Walter Beach remembers such an experience, which might parallel the mindset of a modern-day slave master back in the 60s.
We were on a trip going to Los Angeles, and Art Modell came up to me, and Art Modell said, how you doing? I said, yeah. So I was always reading. So I was reading this book, Message to the Black Man by the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. So Art Modell came up on the airplane and he said, what you reading? I showed him. He said, I don't want you reading that. I said, okay. And he left, the long flight, and he comes back and he said, you still reading that? I said, yeah. He said, I don't want you reading that. Didn't I say I didn't want you reading that? I said, yeah. I said, but I thought you was joking. He said, joking? He said, I'm not joking. I said, you got to be joking, man. Because a man can't tell another man what to read. You can tell me how to play football. You can sign my check. You can send me home. But you can't tell me what to read. Man, and he was kind of a little knocked off. So we get to Los Angeles, and he asked a few people to share some discussions with me about that. And then I made those people aware of the fact that, I said, man, don't talk to me about nothing like that. Don't come to me on behalf of Art Modell to tell me what I should read. So me and that particular individual had that discussion. And, he said, well, I was just trying to make matters easier. I said, don't have to be easy for me. All they can do, man, is sign a check, send me back home. I'm under contract to play football. I ain't under contract to be segregated against or dehumanized or demonized. I didn't sign no contract for that. I'm under contract. So out of that, when Modell and I spoke, he told me he had taken a risk with me because I'd played in the American Football League for 2 years. And I refused to go to New Orleans to play football because we had to live in segregated quarters. So when I refused to go, the Boston Patriots at that time released me because I told them I'm not going to play no football in no segregated situation. So they released me. But then when I came to the Browns, everybody kind of knew about that, so they felt they were taking a chance with me. So Modell says to me, well, Walter, I've done more for black people than they do for themselves. That's what a white man's telling me. I said, Mr. Modell, I said, I doubt that. I'm not going to accept that just because she said, you're not doing anything for me. You're not even doing me a favor, man. If I couldn't play football, I wouldn't be here. So you don't do nothing for black people. If Jim Brown couldn't play football, he wouldn't be here. So you ain't doing nobody no favors, man. We have to come with something. And when you come with your professionalism, your talent, your excellence, and your integrity of who you are, they have to respect it. They may not like it, but they have to respect it. So I have that power. I don't have power to stay on this team because I don't own it. It ain't my father's store. This ain't my father's store. The Browns ain't my father. My father don't own this. Some guys get to situation because their fathers own it. But my father don't own this. So I ain't getting here for that way. I'll come with the wherewithal. I brought what you say you needed. This is what I brought. Now I'm not going to apologize for that. No, I'm not going to allow you to diminish me to do what you do.
As it has been well documented, the 60s weren't a compassionate time for people of color in their quest for equality. Browns receiver Clifton McNeil can forgive. However, he will never forget.
When we came through, we were told that we could not be as good, but we had to be twice, if not more, better than the next guy. There were people who were serving us colored water. We were being denied access. I brought this out in an interview from one of the sports writers who called me from the Plain Dealer. And a lot of people were just recalling some of the memories that they had with their experience with the 64 team. I talked about just what we're talking about now. I said we've come a long way, but we haven't really arrived. There are some things that these young people seem to be unaware of. Some of the things that disturb me today, as I related back to the past, is that I would imagine that more than 90% of all representation that black athletes have are white lawyers. I went to law school. I don't know how many lawyers are really qualified to be very good agents. When you look at the fact that you have counselors like what JB is to this Cleveland team, it's quite an honor, it's quite a task for someone to have to counsel these young people today who have some misplaced values because, a lot of these athletes don't have the same kind of family setting that the player of mine era had. we had father figures who were very prominent in leading and guiding and correcting some of the mistakes. I didn't have the white coaches to be a father figure to me. I had my father whom I would call. I had my uncles who I would call and talk to. I had people whom I could talk to who have experienced it, and they were placing all of their hopes in me. And so the times when I became frustrated at some decisions, like anyone who knows football knows that when I played for Cleveland Browns, there is no reason under God's heaven for Gary Collins not to be the best tight end in football, and Paul Warfield, me, and Walter Flea Roberts not to be the most dynamic passing force that the Cleveland Browns have ever had, and maybe that anybody could put on the football field. But they didn't want to put that many black athletes out there playing. And what the quota system did, they stacked us against each other. In other words, think about it. Paul Warfield, Walter Flea Roberts, and Clifton McNeil were basically playing against each other. I was the guy who was like the pinch hitter. I could play because of the way that they devised their scheme then. Paul Warfield always played left end. Now he could become a flanker or the split end, okay? But he always played the left side. Gary Collins always played the right side. I was the only one who played both sides. Walter Flea could play both sides, okay? But the team never capitalized on what we had that nobody else had. Nobody could match the speed that we had, the talent that we had, the moves that we had, the ability to score the high average per catch that we had. But this team, to me, I even think, and I love the Cleveland Browns, and I am more than appreciative of what they're doing for us right now. Because I played with the 49ers, led the league in receiving. I played with the Giants, made All-Pro, did a lot of things for them. I played with Washington Redskins, and no one has done for me and my family what the Cleveland Browns have done. But back during the time that we're talking about, that period when we're talking about, Art Modell, whom I like, whom I respect, but at the time people were uncomfortable about being innovative and putting the best athletes out there. They were stacking positions. There were many people. In fact, what was so horrible, as great an athlete as I was, and it's not because of me, and I'm not boasting, I'm talking about the gifts that God gave me. Some things that I did that Paul Warfield, nobody else could do. But it's something special God gave me. It's just, it's horrendous for us to be talking about the fact that I even played in the National Football League. Playing with a team where 12 catches was their team record. I catch 11 in the first half, and they refused to throw me another pass the whole football game. I could break the National Football League record. I was ahead of the pace for breaking the National Football League record when I was with the San Francisco 49ers in the first 8 games of the season. The last 6 games of the season, I caught 2 passes, wide open, running up and down the field. So although they said that was the politics of that day, they didn't want some of us to do too well.
A total of 12 African Americans wore a Cleveland Browns uniform on the 1964 NFL championship team. Although that number of players might appear to be pale by today's standards, consider the times back then, and you will immediately call the Browns pioneers and trailblazers.
It was an unusual time. So I never had arguments or discussions with the white ball players around issues. They always thought I was kind of strange. You know, they are strange, but I would speak up and share my views. And I think there were a lot of white ball players on the team accepted that.
Well, the bottom line, emphatically, from my experiences and what I see, you must have an honest person that do not keep you guessing. If you're not doing the right thing, let you know what you have to do. Be honest, back up what they say to you. And that's always going to get better results than those that tell you one thing, do another. Players want to know, where do I stand, coach? Tell me straight up what do I have to do, and I'll do it. But if I don't know, and you tell me one thing and do another, you're taking my heart out. You cannot take the heart out of a player by lying to them or being deceptive or keeping them guessing. You cannot play sports if you're guessing and don't know where you stand. It's real simple. I'm not pointing fingers anywhere. I know you're not.
It's not as fast as a lot of people want the change to be. but it has changed a lot, you know, and you see more black head coaches now. It's you know, the percentage is really not what it should be, but just to see 5 of us out there as head coaches and more as offensive coordinators and defensive coordinators, it's a great feeling for me, you know, and for our people.
A great veteran leadership. There is no question about that. Jim was a central and focal point because of his great contribution on the field, but not only that, in terms of leading by example, he was a vocal leader too, and he would raise the expectations because he wanted to win so fiercely. Frank Bryan was the director, of course, of the offensive team, but we had great leaders on defense. Galen Fisk, who was a team captain. I mean, he was as much a vocal and instrumental leader as Jim Brown or Frank White. Paul Wiggin also showed great leadership. John Wooten in the offensive line, I never saw an individual who had the capacity and the ability to pull a unit together and embellish and to stress teamwork and teammanship and so forth. So we have a number of other players.
The Browns' accomplishments on the field inspired not only a league, but also a city, a nation, and its people of color. Although majority of the Browns fan base was white, you could slowly but surely observe the sprinkles of diversity in the stands. One can only suggest the Browns helped to contribute toward the ease of the wounds of this nation. Folks who may have had their disparities both culturally and socially became one with the Browns. That example of harmony in the stands reflected a brighter vision for the future.
What a trip down memory lane. The name and the colors, along with the spirit, remain the same. And just like Mother Nature, we're growing too. Sports has always been the vent of frustration for racial discrimination for years. Back in 1964, it helped heal some of those wounds of America and bring us all together. The 1964 team, little did they know, they won more off the field than they won on. I'm Ronnie Duncan for the Untold Stories and the other color of winning. Good night.